This one's going to be a little bit of a shorter one. I tend to get a decent amount of people asking me, "Hey man, where's that track?" or "Where exactly can I race in Georgia?" That's where this specific video will come into play. Georgia is a big state, and unfortunately, there aren't too many tracks in and around it compared to, say, Florida or California. However, I hope that by highlighting the tracks we do have, we can get a few more people out there to check them out. Before we get started, I want to take this opportunity to remind you to hit that subscribe button below the video window, and be sure to go ahead and hit the bell icon next to it as well to get notifications as to when I upload. Also, be sure to check the description of this video to check and see what the tracks I mentioned and their schedules. With that out of the way, this is every active RC track in the state of Georgia as of November 2022. Lots of HobbyTown USA locations have RC tracks around the country. This one in particular is located in Columbus, Georgia, right on the border with Alabama. This track mainly runs 10th scale off-road cars, however will occasionally run 8th scale electric buggies and truggies as well from time to time if entries are high enough. The surface itself is very damn clay, and is usually pretty high traction and smooth, especially for large events like Snap Hard or the Megabus races. It's also important to note that the main tires that people use here are pretty much as soft of a slick as you can get on the off days, with generally slightly harder slicks working on days where the track is a little bit more prepped, say for a weekend. HobbyTown Columbus is also the largest indoor RC track in the southeast in terms of surface area. It's also the only indoor RC track that is actively run in the state of Georgia as of me writing this script. Like the namesake suggests, it's attached to a HobbyTown USA that generally stocks all the parts that you need so long as it's either Techno, Associated, or TLR. Most other brands are not supported here, unfortunately. The layout changes once every few months, or whenever there is a big event to make sure no one has a big advantage, and they also happen to have an oval track built into the track layout itself, so if that's your thing, you're catered for in that department. They run off-road racing every Tuesday and Thursday night, along with an oval race every Wednesday night with a few weekend races thrown in every month to spice things up. It's also important to note that this venue has been selected to host the 2023 Roar Nationals, so keep that in mind for later next year. The only caution I'd say to someone coming over from another racing surface like sealed clay or outdoor dirt is there is a lot of cleaning and prepping tires here. Luckily, they do have a cleaning station where you can take care of those needs. Also, be sure to clean your car and tires after a run. Otherwise, it gets really hard to clean off the dirt from the bottom once the clay dries and hardens. Overall, a pretty good track that I definitely highly recommend you check out. The Barn RC Raceway is a relatively new track in Barnesville, Georgia, only opening up pretty much this year. It's an outdoor 8th scale track that sometimes runs 10th scale cars depending on entries, usually 4-wheel-drive buggy. However, if you do plan to race here, I do recommend bringing something of 8th scale size. This is also another track that can and will run nitro vehicles regularly, so if you're into that sort of thing, this is a good track to check out. As of right now, it's a fairly standard track layout, if a bit on the technical side for 8th scale buggies and truggies along with a rhythm section in the middle. The track itself has pit tables underneath the driver's stand, however if you want to plug it into an outlet with an extension cord and have your own pit table, or perhaps you brought your own big ass trailer, there's plenty of room for that. Unfortunately, this isn't one of those places that has its own parts store, but depending on what you run, I wouldn't be too worried about that, as many people tend to bring their own trailer shops, so if you break a part, you can generally find a replacement from one of these absolute chads. They also have a really cool way of watering the track, so you want to see that, be sure to check it out. Also, I'll be there this Saturday for a charity race I'll talk more about in a later video. They don't really have a schedule for consistent races per se, but they do post updates about when practice days are and when they will be racing pretty often, so be sure to check out the description for links to that. Loganville RC Complex is an RC raceway in Loganville, Georgia. You are already more informed. This is probably the largest RC track in Georgia both in land mass and in terms of general entries, at least from what I've seen. The entry part is partially because of its proximity to Atlanta. Anyway, the track itself is pretty much exclusively beholden to 8th scale cars by far. I've seen people run 4-wheel-drive buggies here before, including myself, and they usually get tossed around like ragdolls unless they're techno buggies or really good drivers with any other brand buggies. As you can see, it's an outdoor track with a sort of drainage system, so weather usually isn't that much an issue unless it's actively raining. This track is also where a lot of big race events for 8th scale are held if you're looking for a track that has already been built, other than another track I'm going to mention in a bit. One thing to note about the track, however, is that there are no pit tables provided. However, there are outlets to help you set up, so be sure to bring those pit tables and mobile canopies. Also, there is plenty of space for you to park your big trailer if you happen to have one of those. One last thing to mention about this track is that even though it doesn't have a hobby shop attached to it per se, lots of the locals have their own trailer hobby shops that have very good selections of parts and even kits. I've seen parts for Team Associated, TLR, Hot Bodies, Techno, and even Kyosho and Mugen parts being held at these trailer shops, so I wouldn't worry too much about the lack of an official hobby shop being attached to the track itself. They usually post whenever they're going to race on their website, so I'll be sure to post that in the description. All in all, a pretty good track. Just be sure to bring a lot of extra parts or cash to buy parts, especially during the colder months. This track is large and can be very hard on your RC cars. Hurd Raceway is an RC track in Savannah, Georgia, and is by far the oldest RC racing track in Georgia, perhaps even the Southeast as a whole, but don't quote me on that. Anyway, the track itself, if you're noticing a pattern here, is an outdoor track with a predominantly 8-scale crowd with a little bit of 10-scale thrown in during the larger events. They, from what I've been able to see, don't have pit tables provided, but there is plenty of space for you to set up your own, along with plenty of spaces for extension cords. Pretty much everything I said about Loganville RC Complex can be applied here, with the added benefit of the fact that 10-scale cars can and are run here with some level of frequency and, well, a warmer climate. That includes the fact that there are a lot of other trailer shops and people willing to help you should you need it. Definitely a bucket list track for me, and probably should be for you as well. Chehaw RC Raceway is probably the track I know the least amount about. It's located in Albany, Georgia, and much like Hurd, is attached to a public park, which is always nice to see. Again, it's an outdoor track that mostly runs 8-scale cars while sometimes running 10-scale if the entries call for it. It's also one of the 2 places I know where you can run oval, and is the only place I know that does so outdoors. Much like the other outdoor tracks, it does not have pit tables provided, but they do have places to plug in extension cords. I'm not 100% sure about their activity. However, last time I checked, they were going to have a club race on the 19th, so it would seem like they're not going anywhere. Another track I intend to visit very soon. Both of these tracks' pages I will link in the description below. And those are all of the active tracks in the state of Georgia as of November 2022. I know this video wasn't quite as long as some of my other ones, and believe me when I say I wish I could have filled this video up with more tracks. It's also important to note that none of these tracks are located in North Georgia, so if you're up there, I'm sorry for you. However, if you happen to be within a reasonable distance to one of these tracks, be sure to check them out if you can. Also, if you have any other experiences or knowledge you'd like to share about any of these tracks, be sure to put them in the comment section below. Also, if you like this video, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, if you want to help me another way, be sure to check out my Patreon, where I post updates about things going on behind the scenes. I also give out stickers if you want some of those. Speaking of which, I'd like to thank my patrons Michael Williams, RC World Discord server, Casey Nix, Ben Reeves, Dave Armstrong, Ryan Lamb, Joe Jenkins, Juliet Lovelace, The Mailman 110, Brian Lofton, Ricky Akinlow, Rob Bedingfield, and especially Morrison Watt. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.